The hero who stopped giving a practical guide to mastering your emotions and your life. Introduction. What if everything you've been told about life is backwards? Here's something that might not sit well with you. Most of what you believe about happiness, success, and how to live a good life is probably wrong. Not just a little off, fundamentally backwards. I know. That sounds like the setup to yet another self-help book promising secrets the universe doesn't want you to know. But stay with me here, because what we're going to explore together isn't about secrets. It's about something far more practical and far more ancient. Every human who has ever lived has been searching for the same things: how to suffer less, how to love more, how to feel alive instead of numb, how to make sense of this strange experience called being human. From the shamans of prehistoric caves to the Toltec masters of ancient Mexico, from the Buddha under his tree to the modern psychologist in her office, they've all been mapping the same territory. They just use different languages to describe it. What you're about to experience is a synthesis of wisdom that spans thousands of years and countless traditions, brought together in one place for one purpose: to give you practical tools you can actually use. Not theory, not philosophy to admire from a distance. Real, actionable practices that can transform how you experience your life, starting today. Here's what we're going to cover together. First, we'll explore how you got programmed in the first place, how your mind became filled with beliefs and agreements that aren't even yours. This is the awareness piece, and without it, you're trying to fix a machine you don't understand. Then we'll dive into the 4 foundational skills of emotional mastery: learning to read what's actually happening inside you and others, understanding how emotions influence your thinking, predicting how feelings unfold and change, and finally, managing your emotional life with wisdom rather than just reacting to everything that happens. Next comes the counterintuitive part: why caring less, strategically, deliberately, is actually the key to caring more about what truly matters. Not indifference, not apathy, but the subtle art of choosing what's worth your emotional investment. After that, we'll explore the 4 agreements that can literally rewrite the operating system of your mind. These aren't suggestions. They're tools that, when practiced, can dismantle the suffering, generating machinery that's been running your life without your permission. Finally, we'll look at what all of this means for your actual life. Your relationships, your work, your sense of purpose, and yes, your inevitable death. One more thing before we begin. Throughout this journey together, I'm going to talk to you like a friend, not like a guru on a mountaintop, not like someone who has it all figured out. Because here's the truth: we're all figuring it out. We're all carrying around minds infected with fear-based programming. We're all doing our best with what we have. The question isn't whether you're messed up. The question is whether you're willing to do something about it. Key takeaway: everything you're about to learn points to one radical idea. Your suffering isn't caused by what happens to you. It's caused by what you believe about what happens to you. Change the beliefs and you change everything. Reflection prompt: what's one thing you currently believe about yourself or your life that you suspect might not actually be true, but you've never seriously questioned it? Part 1. Understanding the Machine. Chapter 1. How you became a programmed being. Summary: long before you had the ability to choose what to believe, your mind was being programmed by everyone around you. Parents, teachers, media, culture, they all installed software into your mental operating system without your consent. This process, called domestication, is the root cause of most human suffering. Understanding how you were programmed is the first step toward freedom. Imagine you're born into the world as a blank slate. Not literally blank. You come with certain temperaments, certain tendencies, but in terms of beliefs, of what you know about yourself and the world, that slate is empty. Now imagine that everyone around you, your parents, siblings, relatives, eventually teachers and friends, has a marker in their hand, and they start writing on your slate, not just once, constantly, for years and years. You're so smart. You're not very coordinated, are you? Good girls don't get angry. Boys don't cry. You have to work hard for money. People can't be trusted. You're special. You're not special enough. Here's the catch. You believed all of it. Not because you were gullible or weak, but because you had no choice. When you're a child, the adults around you are like gods. They control your survival. Their word is law, and the parts of your brain that might question or push back, those don't fully develop until your mid-20s. So for decades, you've been running on programming you never consented to. The Toltec tradition, an ancient wisdom lineage from Mexico, has a powerful name for this programming. They call it domestication, the same word we use for training animals. And the comparison isn't flattering, but it's accurate. Think about how you train a dog. You use a system of rewards and punishments. The dog does what you want: treat, praise, affection. The dog does something you don't want: scolding, maybe physical punishment, the withdrawal of love and attention. Over time, the dog internalizes the rules. It doesn't need the treat or the punishment anymore. It's internalized the program. It obeys automatically. The same process happened to you. When you behaved in ways the adults approved of, you got attention, love, approval. When you behaved in ways they didn't like, you got something much worse than physical punishment. You got the withdrawal of attention. You got the message: you are not acceptable as you are. And here's the part that really matters. Out of all this programming, you constructed something, an image of who you're supposed to be. The Toltec call this the image of perfection. It's the idealized version of yourself that would finally, at long last, be good enough for everyone. The problem, of course, is that you never reach it. You can't. It's not real. It's a composite of everyone else's expectations and fears and projections. And because you can never reach it, you spend your life feeling like a failure. Not good enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough. Meanwhile, inside your head, two characters have taken up permanent residence. The first is the judge. The judge's job is simple. It compares everything you do, think, and feel against your internal rulebook, what we might call your book of law. And let's be clear, this judge is harsh. It's the internalized voice of every adult who ever criticized you, every teacher who ever made you feel small, every bully who ever pointed out your flaws. The second character is the victim. The victim receives the judge's verdicts. It carries the guilt, the shame, the sense of inadequacy. It's the part of you that says, "Poor me," and genuinely believes it. The victim feels helpless because, from its perspective, the judge is always right. Here's why this matters so much. These two characters, the judge and the victim, are running your life. They're making your decisions. They're filtering your perceptions. They're creating your emotional reality. And they're doing it all based on a rule book you never consciously chose. Here's an exercise for you. Take out a notebook, or just open a note on your phone, and consider these questions. What were you told about yourself as a child? Who told you these things? What were the messages about your body, your intelligence, your worth? What were you taught about being a boy or a girl? What were the rules? What happened if you broke them? What is your image of perfection? If you could describe the ideal you, the one who would finally be acceptable, what would that person look like? How would they act? What would they have achieved? Most people, when they do this exercise honestly, discover something startling. Their image of perfection is impossible. It's contradictory. It's not even something they would have chosen for themselves. They've been trying to achieve something that was never achievable in the first place. The Toltec have another concept worth understanding here. They call it the maitot, a word that evokes the sound of 1,000 people talking all at once in a marketplace. That's what your mind sounds like. All those voices, all those beliefs, all those agreements, contradicting each other, competing for attention. You should work harder. You need to rest more. Take risks. Play it safe. Be yourself. No, not like that. And then there's what we might call the parasite, the Toltec name for the entire system of the judge, the victim, and the book of law. It's a living entity, in a sense, made of psychic energy. It feeds on your emotional reactions. It thrives on drama, fear, shame, guilt. Every time you judge yourself, every time you feel victimized, every time you create unnecessary suffering, you're feeding the parasite. This isn't just poetic metaphor, it's a description of how neural pathways work. Anything you repeat becomes automatic. Your judgments, your self-criticism, your emotional reactions, they're not you in any essential sense. They're just well-worn grooves in your brain. Habits of thinking and feeling that have been practiced so many times they feel like reality. The good news? Anything that was learned can be unlearned. Anything that was programmed can be reprogrammed. The first step is simply awareness, seeing clearly what's been happening inside your own mind. Key takeaway: you are not your thoughts. You are not your beliefs. You are the awareness that can observe both, and that awareness has the power to choose differently. Reflection prompt: if you could remove one self-critical belief from your mind forever, one agreement that causes you the most suffering, what would it be? Chapter 2: The Creator You've Forgotten. You are summary. Every human being possesses an extraordinary power, the power of the word. Your word isn't just sound, it's creative force. What you say, think, and believe literally shapes your reality. But most people have given this power away, investing their faith in limiting beliefs that were programmed into them. Reclaiming your word means reclaiming your creative power. Here's a statement that might seem grandiose until you really sit with it. Humans are creators, not in some metaphorical sense. Literally. Everything you see around you, the building you're in, the device you're using, the language you're speaking, began as a thought in someone's mind, and that thought was expressed through the word. The word isn't just a sound or a symbol. The word is the carrier of intent. When you say something with conviction, when you put your faith behind your words, you set forces in motion. This is why every spiritual tradition in the world, in one way or another, recognizes the creative power of speech. In the beginning was the word. As a man thinketh, so is he. The specific language varies, but the insight is universal. But here's the problem. Most of us have invested all of our creative power, all of our faith, all of our word, into beliefs that limit and diminish us. Let me explain with an example. Imagine you have 100 units of personal power, 100 units of creative energy, of faith, of will. And let's say you made an agreement with yourself years ago. I'm not good at public speaking. That agreement took maybe 4 units of power to establish. You believed it. Your mother said you were shy. Your teacher embarrassed you once when you stumbled over words. You collected evidence. You practiced being nervous. You mastered the agreement. Now, logically, to break that agreement, you should only need about 4 units of power, the same amount you used to create it. But here's the thing. Where are your other 96 units? They're tied up in all the other agreements that make up your reality. I'm a responsible person. I'm bad at sports. I can't sing. Money is hard to earn. Relationships are complicated. I'm too old to change. That's just how I am. Every single one of these agreements requires energy to maintain. Every one of them has some of your faith invested in it. And so when you decide to change one agreement, I'm going to become a confident public speaker, you find that you don't have enough free power available. The old agreement holds. This is why change is hard. This is why you can intellectually understand that smoking is killing you and still reach for another cigarette. This is why you can know that a relationship is toxic and still stay. The will isn't free. It's trapped inside a structure of beliefs. Think of your belief system as a building made of bricks. Each brick is an agreement. Some bricks are small. I like chocolate ice cream. Some are massive. I am fundamentally unworthy of love. And all of them are cemented together with your faith. Your power of creation is the mortar holding the entire structure together. Now, what happens if you start removing bricks? If you start breaking agreements one by one, starting with the smallest? At first, nothing dramatic, but as you continue, the whole structure begins to weaken. Eventually it collapses, what the Toltec call losing the human form. The old identity, built on fear-based agreements, falls apart. This is terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Terrifying because the old identity, however painful, was at least familiar. You knew who you were, even if who you were was miserable. Liberating because once the old structure falls, you're free to build something new, something based on truth instead of lies, something based on love instead of fear. Here's what you need to understand about faith. It's not just about religion. Faith is what happens when you believe something completely, without doubt. And faith is creative. Whatever you believe with your whole being, I am capable or I am worthless, thy will be done. Your life will organize itself around that belief. You'll notice evidence that confirms it. You'll create situations that prove it. Your faith makes it true. The word is also the vehicle for something else, the transfer of what we might call emotional poison. When someone gossips to you, what's happening? They're angry or jealous or afraid, and they want to feel better. So they hook your attention. That's the key, your attention, and they dump their poison into you. They tell you about someone else's failings, or their own victim story, or why the world is so unfair. And if you accept it, if you agree with it, you've just ingested poison. This is why gossip is so destructive. Not because it's mean, though it often is, but because it spreads emotional contagion. The person who gossips feels temporarily relieved because they've transferred their poison to you. You feel a little worse, a little more judgmental, a little more disconnected from love. And if you pass the gossip along, you transfer the poison to someone else. Being impeccable with your word, one of the 4 agreements we'll explore in depth later, means becoming aware of what you're creating with your speech. Are you creating connection or division? Are you spreading love or fear? Are you reinforcing limiting beliefs or challenging them? Key takeaway: your word is a seed. Everything you say to yourself and others will eventually bear fruit in your life. The question is, what kind of garden are you planting? Reflection prompt. Think about the last conversation you had. What seeds were you planting with your words? What might grow from them? Chapter 3. You're dreaming right now, no really. Summary. Your entire experience of reality is a dream, a virtual simulation constructed by your mind. This isn't philosophy, it's neuroscience. Light hits your retina, your brain interprets the signals, and you experience a world that seems solid and real. But it's all happening inside your head. Understanding that you're dreaming gives you the power to change the dream. Let's do something a little trippy for a moment. Look at the room around you. Look at your hands. Listen to whatever sounds are present. This all seems very real, doesn't it? Solid. Objective. Out there. But here's what's actually happening. Light is bouncing off objects and entering your eyes. Your retina converts that light into electrical signals. Those signals travel through your optic nerve to your visual cortex, where your brain constructs an image. That image is what you see. It's not the thing itself. It's a representation, a dream. The same is true for sound, for touch, for every sense you have. Your entire experience of reality is a neural simulation, a virtual reality being generated by your brain, moment by moment. When you're asleep at night, the same brain generates a different simulation, drawing on memory and imagination instead of sensory input. But the fundamental process is the same. The Toltec understood this thousands of years before neuroscience confirmed it. They called life a dream. Not metaphorically, literally. The dream of the first attention is what we call waking life. The dream of the second attention is what we call sleep. And the dream of the planet is the collective dream we're all participating in, the shared beliefs, agreements, and assumptions that constitute a society. Here's why this matters so much. Once you understand that you're dreaming, you realize the dream can be changed. The solidity was an illusion. The reality you thought was fixed and unchangeable is actually fluid, responsive to your attention and intention. Most people, however, dream without awareness. They don't know they're dreaming. They react to the dream as if it were real, solid, objective. Someone insults them and they take it personally, as if the insult has real substance, as if it says something true about who they are. They experience fear about the future, as if the future, which doesn't exist yet, could actually harm them. They carry guilt about the past, as if the past, which no longer exists, could define their present value. But here's the shift. When you know you're dreaming, other people's behavior stops being personal. You see them as dreamers, too, each one living in their own simulation, their own virtual reality, their own unique dream. What they say and do is a reflection of their dream, not an objective assessment of you. Their judgments come from their book of law. Their reactions come from their programming. It has nothing to do with you, even when it seems like it's entirely about you. This insight alone can transform your relationships. When your partner snaps at you, you don't have to take it personally. You can see it. They're having a moment in their dream. They're reacting to something in their own mind. You can respond with compassion instead of defensiveness, with curiosity instead of counterattack. The same shift transforms your relationship with your own mind. When you notice the judge starting up, "You're so stupid. Why did you say that? You always mess things up." You can step back and observe. There's the judge. There's the old program running. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to fight it. You just notice it. And in noticing, you create a gap between the thought and your identification with it. In that gap is freedom. In that gap, you can choose a different response. Instead of agreeing with the judge and spiraling into shame, you can say, "Interesting, there's that old pattern again." Or even better, "I see you, judge. Not today." This is what it means to have free will in the Toltec sense. It doesn't mean you control external events. It means you control where you place your attention in response to external events. You control whether you feed the parasite or starve it. You control whether you strengthen old fear-based neural pathways or create new ones. Here's a practical way to experience this. For the next 24 hours, try on the perspective that everyone you encounter is dreaming. Your boss, your partner, the stranger in the grocery store, each one is living in a completely different virtual reality. Each one has a different book of law, a different judge, a different victim. Each one is reacting to their own internal simulation, not to objective reality. From this perspective, taking anything personally becomes absurd. It would be like getting offended by something a character said in someone else's dream. It has nothing to do with you. Key takeaway: you are not a character in the objective world. You are the dreamer, and the entire dream is happening inside your awareness. Wake up to this and you gain the power to shape the dream. Reflection prompt. Think of a recent situation where you took something personally. What if you could now see that person's behavior as reflecting only their own dream, their own programming, not a truth about you? Chapter 4. The 4 Skills of Emotional Intelligence. Summary. Becoming emotionally intelligent means mastering 4 specific abilities: accurately identifying emotions in yourself and others, using emotions to facilitate thinking, understanding how emotions work and change, and managing emotions wisely. These aren't soft skills. They're the foundation of effective decision-making, leadership, and living well. Now that we've explored how your mind got programmed and how your reality is essentially a dream, let's get practical. What specific skills do you need to navigate this dream with wisdom rather than just reacting to it? For decades, we've been told that emotions and thinking are separate, even opposed. Don't be so emotional. Let's look at this rationally. The implicit message is that emotions are the enemy of good decisions, that feelings are what mess things up. This view is not just wrong, it's dangerously wrong. Neuroscience has shown conclusively that people with damage to the emotional centers of their brains cannot make good decisions. They can analyze endlessly, but they can't decide. They can reason through options, but they can't choose. Why? Because decision-making requires emotion. It requires a sense of what matters, what has value, what feels right. Emotions are not the enemy of thinking. Emotions are a form of information. They're data. Sophisticated data that evolved over millions of years to help us survive and thrive. The feeling of fear says, "Pay attention, something might be wrong." The feeling of anger says, "A boundary has been crossed." The feeling of joy says, "This is good, do more of this." The challenge isn't to eliminate emotions or to control them in some repressive way. The challenge is to become emotionally intelligent, to develop the skills that allow you to work with emotions rather than being overwhelmed by them or ignoring them entirely. Let's break down the 4 core emotional skills, one by one. Skill 1. Identify emotions. The first and most fundamental skill is simply being able to accurately recognize what you're feeling and what others are feeling. This sounds basic, but think about how many people you know who clearly have no idea what they're feeling. They'll be visibly angry, red face, clenched jaw, sharp tone, and if you ask them, they'll insist they're fine. They're not lying. They genuinely don't know. Identifying emotions requires paying attention to 3 main channels: facial expressions, voice tone and rhythm, and body language. When someone is genuinely happy, their mouth smiles and their eyes crinkle, the famous Duchenne smile. A fake smile involves only the mouth. When someone is angry, their lips compress, their eyes narrow, their voice becomes clipped and sharp. When someone is sad, their shoulders slump, their voice slows down, their eyes look downward. But the most critical piece of emotional identification is this: you can't accurately read others until you can read yourself. If you're disconnected from your own emotional experience, you'll project that disconnection onto others. You'll misinterpret neutral expressions as hostile or miss clear signals of distress. Here's an exercise. For 1 week, keep a mood journal. 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening, rate how you're feeling on a scale. Note what happened just before the feeling. Notice if there are patterns. Do you always crash at 3 p.m.? Does a particular interaction reliably trigger anxiety? The goal isn't to judge the feelings, it's just to become aware of them. Skill 2. Use emotions. Once you can identify emotions, the next skill is understanding how they influence your thinking, and then using that knowledge intentionally. Here's something most people don't know. Different emotions facilitate different types of thinking. When you're in a positive mood, you're better at creative thinking. You generate more ideas. You see novel connections. You're more open to possibilities. When you're in a slightly negative mood, you're better at analytical thinking. You catch errors. You focus on details. You're more systematic. Neither is better. They're better for different tasks. The emotionally intelligent person knows this and can either match the task to their current mood or generate the mood that matches the task. Let's say you need to proofread an important document. You're feeling happy and expansive. Great for brainstorming, terrible for catching small errors. An emotionally intelligent approach would be to intentionally shift your mood slightly downward before starting the proofreading. Not into depression, just into a more careful, detail-oriented state. Conversely, if you're feeling down and need to generate creative solutions for a problem, you might want to lift your mood first. Listen to upbeat music. Think about something you're grateful for. Take a quick walk. This skill also includes empathy, the ability to generate an emotion that matches what someone else is feeling. Not just intellectually understanding they're sad, but actually generating a feeling of sadness within yourself so you can connect with their experience. This is what creates genuine rapport. This is what makes people feel truly heard and understood. Skill 3. Understand emotions. Emotions aren't random. They follow rules. They have causes, and they develop in predictable patterns. Understanding emotions means being able to answer questions like, what typically causes sadness, loss or disappointment? What typically causes anger, perceived injustice or obstruction? How does frustration develop into anger and anger into rage? What's the difference between guilt and shame? Guilt is about what you did. Shame is about who you are. It also means having a rich emotional vocabulary. Most people have about 5 emotional categories: happy, sad, angry, afraid, and fine. But within each category are gradations: annoyance, frustration, irritation, anger, fury, rage. These are different intensities of the same basic emotion. Being able to distinguish them matters. Telling your partner I'm feeling a little frustrated about this situation is very different from I'm enraged, and the former allows for a very different conversation than the latter. One of the most powerful aspects of understanding emotions is the ability to do emotional what-if analysis. If your boss tends to react badly to surprises and you need to deliver some unexpected bad news, what happens if you just blurt it out? She'll likely be shocked, which will intensify to anger. But what if you prepare her first? What if you say, I have some news I need to share, and I want to give you context before I jump into it? Now you're managing the emotional trajectory. You're anticipating how feelings will develop and planning accordingly. Skill 4. Manage emotions. The fourth skill, and the one most people think of when they hear emotional intelligence, is the ability to manage emotions. But here's the crucial nuance. Managing emotions doesn't mean suppressing them. It doesn't mean always being calm. It means integrating emotions with thinking to make wise decisions. There are 2 bad approaches to emotions, and most people oscillate between them. The first is suppression, ignoring feelings, pushing them down, pretending they don't exist. This works temporarily, but suppressed emotions don't disappear. They go underground and influence behavior in ways you don't see. They emerge as irritability, as physical symptoms, as disproportionate reactions to minor triggers. The second bad approach is venting, letting emotions explode, acting on every impulse, believing that getting it out is healthy. But research is clear. Venting anger doesn't reduce anger. It rehearses it. It strengthens the neural pathways for anger, making you more likely to explode again. The emotionally intelligent approach is different. It starts with staying open to the feeling, not pushing it away, not acting on it immediately, but just allowing it to be there. Then you examine it. What is this feeling telling me? What's the information here? Is this feeling proportionate to the situation, or is it being amplified by old programming? What would be the wise response? There's also a crucial distinction between emotions and moods. Emotions are brief, specific, and have identifiable causes. I'm angry because my colleague took credit for my work. Moods are diffuse, longer, lasting, and often have unclear causes. I just feel down today. You should rarely make important decisions based on a mood, because the mood may have nothing to do with the situation at hand. It could be caused by lack of sleep, low blood sugar, or an interaction from hours ago that's still coloring your perception. One of the most practical tools in emotion management is what we might call mood matching. Before a task, ask yourself, what mood would best facilitate this? Need to brainstorm? Generate a positive mood. Need to review a contract? Shift to a more careful, slightly negative mood. Need to have a difficult conversation? Aim for calm and centered, not aggressive, not avoidant. Key takeaway. Emotions are not obstacles to good thinking. They are essential inputs. The person who can read emotions, use them to facilitate thought, understand their patterns, and manage them wisely doesn't just make better decisions. They live a richer, more connected life. Reflection prompt. Which of the 4 emotional skills feels weakest for you right now? What would change in your life if you developed that skill more fully? Chapter 5. Stop caring about the wrong things. Summary. The phrase not giving a fuck doesn't mean being indifferent. It means being ruthlessly selective about what you invest your emotional energy in. Most people spread their care across hundreds of trivial concerns, leaving nothing for what truly matters. The art is learning to care deeply about a few things and let everything else go. Now we come to a concept that might seem to contradict everything we've been discussing. I've been telling you that emotions matter, that they contain valuable information, that you should pay attention to them. And now I'm going to tell you that the key to a good life is not caring. Let me clarify, because this is important. There's a huge difference between not caring at all, which is apathy, depression, disengagement from life, and not caring about the right things. The first is a problem. The second is a superpower. Think about it. You have a finite amount of emotional energy. Every time you get upset about traffic, every time you stew over a minor slight, every time you lose sleep because of something trivial, you're spending a limited resource source. And when something truly important comes along, you're depleted. You have nothing left to give. The subtle art, then, is about selection. It's about choosing, deliberately and consciously, what is worth caring about and what isn't. And the uncomfortable truth is that most of what we care about isn't worth it. We've been trained to care about the wrong things. Here are 3 sub-subtleties to really understand. First, not caring isn't the same as being indifferent. The indifferent person doesn't care about anything. They're checked out. The person practicing the subtle art cares deeply, but only about what they've chosen to care about. They've drawn a circle around the things that matter to them, and they invest their energy there. Everything outside the circle, they let it go. Second, to stop caring about trivialities, you need to care about something more important. This is crucial. You can't just decide, I'm not going to care about anything. The mind doesn't work that way. If you try to empty yourself of care, you'll just fill up with more trivial cares. The only effective strategy is to fill yourself with something worth caring about so completely that there's no room left for the small stuff. Third, you're already choosing what to care about. You just might not be doing it consciously. Every time you get upset, every time you focus your attention on something, you're making a choice. The question is whether you're choosing deliberately or just running on autopilot. Now, here's something that might really bother you. Happiness isn't about eliminating problems. It's about finding problems you enjoy solving. Let that sink in. Most people have a fantasy of a problem-free life. If they could just get the promotion, find the right partner, lose the weight, make enough money, then they'd be happy. Then the struggles would be over. But this is a fantasy because problems never end. When you solve one set of problems, you just get a new, upgraded set of problems. Getting in shape gives you the problem of maintaining your fitness. Finding a partner gives you the problem of maintaining the relationship. Getting rich gives you the problem of managing wealth. The goal, then, isn't to eliminate problems. The goal is to have better problems. To trade the problems you hate for problems you can engage with meaningfully. The person who loves their work still has work problems, but they're interesting problems. The person in a great marriage still has relationship challenges, but they're challenges worth working through. So the question to ask yourself isn't, what life do I want to be living? It's what struggles do I want to take on? What problems do I enjoy solving? This connects directly to what we discussed earlier about values. What you care about, what you choose to invest in, determines what problems you'll have. If you value material success above all, you'll have the problems that come with relentless ambition. If you value comfort above all, you'll have the problems that come with avoiding challenges. If you value honesty, you'll have the problems that come with telling difficult truths. The key is to choose your problems consciously, and then embrace them. Not resent them, embrace them. Because those problems are the price of admission for the life you've chosen. This perspective changes everything about how you approach difficulty. When something hard comes up, instead of thinking, why is this happening to me? This shouldn't be happening. You can think, yes, this is the kind of problem I chose. This is part of the deal. Let me engage with it. Key takeaway: you cannot avoid struggle. You can only choose your struggle. Choose wisely, or life will choose for you, and you probably won't like what it picks. Reflection prompt: what are you currently caring about that, if you're honest, isn't worth the energy? And what might you care about instead that would make the trivial things fade into the background? Chapter 6. You're wrong, and that's actually great news. Summary: growth requires being wrong, a lot. The human mind craves certainty, but certainty is the enemy of learning. The most freeing realization you can have is that you're probably wrong about most things, and that's okay, because being wrong is how you update your understanding and get closer to truth. Here's an uncomfortable question. What are you wrong about right now? I don't mean what were you wrong about in the past. We all have those stories. I mean right now, today, what belief are you holding that you're absolutely convinced is true, but isn't? The tricky thing about being wrong is that it doesn't feel wrong. If it felt wrong, you wouldn't believe it. Being wrong feels exactly like being right. That's the whole problem. Human history is essentially a long story of people being wrong, then becoming slightly less wrong, then being wrong again at a higher level. For most of human history, we were certain the Earth was flat. Then we were certain the sun revolved around the Earth. Then we were certain Newton had physics figured out, until Einstein showed up. At every stage, we were confident. At every stage, we were wrong. The same is true in your personal life. Think about beliefs you held 10 years ago that now seem obviously wrong. Maybe about a relationship or a career path, or what would make you happy. At the time, you were sure. Now looking back, you can't believe you thought that. But here's the key. If you were wrong then, and you're in the same mental process now, isn't it likely you're wrong about some things you're currently certain about? This isn't cause for despair. It's cause for liberation. When you accept that you're probably wrong about a lot of things, you stop clinging so tightly to your opinions. You stop needing to be right in every argument. You stop defending positions just because they're yours. Instead, you get curious. You ask questions. You listen. You become someone who can actually learn. The opposite of this is the person who can never be wrong. You know this person. They'll defend the most absurd position rather than admit they made a mistake. They'll rewrite history to avoid acknowledging error. They'll end relationships rather than say, I was wrong about that. This isn't strength, it's fragility. It's a person so terrified of uncertainty that they've built a fortress of false certainty around themselves. And fortresses like that, they're prisons. There's a powerful question you can ask yourself when you're stuck in a conflict or a belief that's causing suffering. What if I'm wrong about this? Let's say you're convinced that your daughter shouldn't go to art school, she should go to law school. She needs a real career. You're just looking out for her. You're right about this. What if you're wrong? What if your real objection isn't about her career at all, but about your own fears? What if you're afraid that pursuing art is risky and you can't tolerate risk? What if you're jealous that she has the courage to follow a passion that you never pursued? What if your certainty about law school is really about controlling her, not protecting her? These are painful questions. They threaten your self-image as a wise, caring parent. But they might also be true. And if they're true, then the only way forward, the only way to heal the relationship, is to consider that you might be wrong. Then ask the follow-up. Would being wrong create a better problem or a worse problem than being right? In the daughter example, being right means continuing the conflict, damaging the relationship, and possibly pushing your daughter away. Being wrong means admitting your fears, supporting her autonomy, and trusting her to find her own path. The first problem is ongoing suffering for everyone. The second problem is a moment of discomfort for you, followed by a stronger relationship, which is actually the better problem. This is what it means to live with uncertainty, not to abandon all beliefs. That's impossible. But to hold beliefs lightly. To be willing to update them when new information comes in. To see being wrong not as a failure, but as a step toward being less wrong. Key takeaway. The goal isn't to be right. The goal is to become less wrong over time. And the only way to do that is to accept uncertainty and treat your beliefs as hypotheses to be tested, not truths to be defended. Reflection prompt. What's one belief you hold strongly that, if you're honest, you've never really examined? What would it mean if you were wrong about? Chapter 7. The transformative power of failure. Summary. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a necessary component of it. Every skill, every achievement, every meaningful life includes failure as part of the process. The problem isn't failing, it's the fear of failing which prevents action. The solution is simple. Act first and let motivation follow. We've all been sold a lie about success. The lie is that successful people succeed because they're talented or lucky or chosen. We see the highlight reels of other people's lives and compare them to our own behind, the scenes footage. We see the published book, not the drawer full of rejections. We see the thriving business, not the 3 that failed before it. But here's the truth. Failure is the raw material of success, not a detour from the path itself. Think about learning to walk. You failed hundreds of times. You fell, you wobbled, you crashed into furniture. No one watched you struggle to stand and said, "Looks like walking isn't for this kid. Better stick to crawling." Of course not. Failure was expected. It was part of the learning process. Somewhere along the way, we lose this understanding. We start believing that failure means something about us, that we're not smart enough, not talented enough, not deserving. And so we stop trying. We protect ourselves from the possibility of failure by never fully committing. If we don't really try, we can't really fail. This is the great trap. The fear of failure becomes the failure itself. There's a psychological truth here that most people resist. Action doesn't follow motivation. Motivation follows action. You probably think you need to feel ready before you act. You need to feel inspired before you create. You need to feel confident before you take the risk. It's the other way around. Action generates motivation, not the reverse. The writer who shows up at her desk every morning and writes garbage for an hour, eventually the garbage starts to contain gems. The exercise, the repetition, the commitment to action, that's what generates the motivation to continue. The feeling of progress comes from doing the work, not from thinking about doing the work. There's a story about a graduate student working on her thesis. She's exhausted, burned out, completely stuck. The conclusion won't come together. But she commits to writing for 1 hour every morning before work. The first week, everything she writes is terrible. The second week, still mostly terrible, but there's one decent paragraph. The third week, she has a breakthrough. Not because she suddenly felt inspired, but because the cumulative effect of daily action, even bad action, created the conditions for insight. This is why always do your best is one of the 4 agreements. But here's the nuance. Your best changes from moment to moment. Your best when you're well, rested and inspired is different from your best when you're exhausted and discouraged. The agreement isn't to always perform at peak capacity. It's to always give what you have. If today you only have 40% and you give that 40%, you've done your best. There's no room for self-judgment there. You gave everything you had. This understanding dissolves the perfectionism that paralyzes so many people. Perfectionism says, if I can't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all. Doing your best says, I'll do what I can with what I have right now. The first leads to inaction and self-recrimination. The second leads to progress and self-acceptance. Rejection is another form of failure that carries immense value if you're willing to receive it. Think about the people whose feedback actually helps you grow. Is it the friend who always tells you you're great, never challenges you, never points out where you're going wrong? Or is it the friend who tells you hard truths, who calls you on your bullshit, who makes you uncomfortable? The friend who risks the relationship to tell you what you need to hear. That's the friend who helps you become better. Rejection works the same way. When your work is rejected, when your ideas are challenged, when someone tells you no, you're receiving information. You're learning where you need to improve. You're discovering which battles are worth fighting and which aren't. The flip side is equally important. Learning to reject well. Learning to set boundaries. Many people fear rejection so deeply that they can't say no themselves. They take on obligations they resent. They stay in relationships that drain them. They agree to things they don't believe in. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's honest. It's telling the truth about what you can and cannot do, what you will and will not accept. The person who never says no eventually burns out, becomes resentful, and ends up helping no one. The person who says no clearly and kindly preserves their energy for the things they can truly contribute to. Key takeaway: don't wait to feel ready. Act, and the readiness will follow. Don't fear rejection. It's free information about what needs to change, either in your work or in your relationships. Reflection prompt: what's one thing you've been avoiding because you're afraid of failure? What's the smallest possible action you could take today that would move you forward, regardless of the outcome? Part 2. The 4 Agreements. Chapter 8. Agreement 1. Be impeccable with your word. Summary: your word is your creative power. When you speak with integrity, you build self-trust and personal power. When you use your word against yourself or others, through self-criticism, gossip, or lies, you drain your energy and reinforce suffering. Being impeccable means using your word in the direction of truth and love. Now we arrive at the practical core, the 4 agreements that can literally rewrite your mental programming. These aren't concepts to admire, they're tools to practice. And the first is the most fundamental. Be impeccable with your word. What does impeccable mean here? It comes from the Latin impeccabilis, im without, peccare to sin, without sin. But in this context, sin isn't about violating religious rules. Sin is anything that goes against yourself, anything that creates suffering for you or others. Being impeccable, then, means acting in ways that support life rather than diminish it. And your word? Your word isn't just what you say out loud. It's the totality of yourself, expression. It's what you think about yourself. It's what you tell others about yourself. It's what you say about others when they're not present. It's the mental chatter that runs constantly in the background of your mind. Being impeccable with your word means several things. First, it means speaking with integrity. Saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Not making promises you can't keep. Not saying yes when you mean no. Not pretending to agree when you actually disagree. This alone would transform most people's lives and most relationships. Second, it means not using the word against yourself. This is the big one. Most of us have a running commentary of self-criticism. I'm so stupid, I always mess up, I'll never be good enough. What's wrong with me? Every time you say or think these things, you're using your creative power to reinforce a reality of inadequacy. You're feeding the parasite. What if instead you spoke to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you deeply loved? What if when you made a mistake you said, "Okay, that didn't work. What can I learn?" instead of "I'm such an idiot"? The first uses your word to create growth. The second uses it to create suffering. Third, it means not using the word against others. This is where gossip comes in. Gossip is poison, literally, emotionally, energetically. When you gossip, you're spreading negative energy, you're creating division, you're reinforcing a reality of judgment and separation. And here's the part most people miss. Gossiping about others always, eventually, turns back on yourself. If you're willing to talk about someone behind their back, you're teaching yourself that this is how humans treat each other. You're creating a world where trust is impossible. There's a simple test for whether you're being impeccable with your word. How do you feel after you've spoken? If you feel lighter, clearer, more connected, you were impeccable. If you feel a little dirty, a little guilty, a little less than yourself, you used the word against yourself or someone else. The practice of impeccability starts with awareness. Just notice, for one day, how you use your word. Count the self, critical thoughts. Notice the moments of gossip. Observe when you say something you don't mean. Don't judge yourself for it. That's just more non-impeccability. Just notice. Then, gradually begin to choose differently. When you catch yourself about to gossip, change the subject or say something positive. When you notice self-criticism, ask yourself, would I say this to someone I love? If not, don't say it to yourself. Key takeaway, your word creates your world. Speak with integrity, especially to yourself, and watch your reality transform. Reflection prompt. What's the most common way you use your word against yourself? If you could change just that one habit, how might your life be different? Chapter 9, Agreement 2. Don't take anything personally. Summary. What others say and do is a reflection of their own dream, their own programming, their own wounds. It has nothing to do with you, even when it seems entirely about you. When you stop taking things personally, you gain immunity to the emotional poison others try to transfer, and you reclaim enormous energy that was being wasted on defensiveness and resentment. The second agreement is the one that most people find simultaneously the most liberating and the most difficult to practice. Don't take anything personally. Here's why this is so hard. We've been trained since childhood to believe that everything is personal. When someone is angry, we assume we caused it. When someone criticizes us, we assume the criticism is valid. When someone rejects us, we assume we're rejectable. But step back for a moment. Consider what we've already explored. Everyone is dreaming their own dream. Everyone has their own book of law, their own judge, their own history of wounds and programming. When someone reacts to you, with anger, criticism, rejection, they're reacting through the filter of their own dream. They're reacting to their version of you, which may have almost nothing to do with who you actually are. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're walking down the street and a stranger yells at you, "You idiot! I hate you!" You'd probably be startled, maybe a little annoyed. But would you take it deeply personally? Would you spiral into self-doubt? Probably not, because you'd recognize that this person is obviously dealing with their own issues. Their outburst tells you something about them, not about you. Now imagine the same words from your partner. Suddenly it feels incredibly personal. It cuts deep. You react, you defend, you counter-attack. But from the perspective of the second agreement, the situation is identical. In both cases, the other person is expressing their emotional state. They're projecting their dream onto you. The fact that you're in a relationship with the second person doesn't make their words any more true. It just makes them more triggering because they touch wounds you already have. Here's the key insight. Whatever upsets you about what someone else says is actually touching an agreement you already have with yourself. If someone calls you stupid and you get upset, it's because somewhere inside you, you already believe you might be stupid. If you were completely certain of your intelligence, the comment would slide off you. You might find it amusing. You might feel compassion for the other person's need to insult. But you wouldn't take it personally. This means that every time you take something personally, you're being given a gift, a map to your own wounds. The person who triggered you has just shown you where you're still carrying old beliefs, old programming, old agreements that cause suffering. Instead of blaming them, you can thank them for the mirror and get to work healing the wound. Now, there's a nuance here that's important. Not taking things personally doesn't mean being passive or accepting abuse. It doesn't mean staying in situations that are harmful. You can recognize that someone's behavior reflects their own issues and still choose to remove yourself from the situation. You can set boundaries without taking things personally. In fact, when you're not taking things personally, setting boundaries becomes easier because you're not tangled up in guilt or defensiveness. The practice: when someone says or does something that triggers you, pause. Before reacting, ask yourself, what wound is this touching in me? What do I believe about myself that makes this hurt? Then ask, is what they're saying actually true, or is it just a reflection of their own dream? With practice, the space between the trigger and the reaction grows larger. Eventually, you can hear criticism, rejection, even insult, and respond with genuine equanimity, not because you're suppressing your feelings, but because you've truly internalized that it's not about you. Key takeaway: everything others do is a projection of their own reality. When you become immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. Reflection prompt: think of the last time you took something personally. What wound did it touch? What did you believe about yourself that made it sting? Chapter 10. Agreement. 3. Don't make assumptions. Summary: most human drama comes from making assumptions about what others think, what they meant, what they want, what will happen. The antidote is simple but requires courage. Ask questions, communicate clearly, and accept that you cannot read minds. When you stop assuming, most conflicts dissolve before they even begin. The third agreement addresses perhaps the single biggest source of unnecessary human suffering. Don't make assumptions. Think about the last conflict you had with someone. Really think about it. What started it? Chances are someone made an assumption. I assumed you meant. I thought you were going to. I figured you knew that. Assumptions are the stories we tell ourselves in the absence of information. And because nature abhors a vacuum, our minds fill the gap with narratives, usually narratives that cast us as the victim or the hero and the other person as the villain. The problem with assumptions isn't just that they're often wrong, it's that we treat them as truth. Once we've assumed something, we act on it as if it were established fact. We get angry about things that never happened. We create elaborate dramas about motives that never existed. We damage relationships over misunderstandings that could have been cleared up with a single question. Consider the classic example. You text someone and they don't respond. What happens in your mind? If you're like most people, you start spinning stories. They're ignoring me. They're angry about something. Did I do something wrong? They must think I'm annoying. By the time they finally respond, sorry, my phone died. You've already gone through an entire emotional journey based on nothing. Now multiply that by every relationship in your life. Every time you assume you know what someone is thinking, what they want, what they meant, you're gambling with your peace of mind, and you're usually losing. The solution is radical in its simplicity. Ask. Instead of assuming, communicate. Instead of guessing what your partner needs, ask. Instead of imagining what your boss thinks of your work, check in. Instead of assuming your friend is upset with you, say, hey, I noticed you seemed quiet earlier. Is everything okay? This requires courage. Asking questions makes you vulnerable. When you ask, you might hear something you don't want to hear. But here's the thing. Whatever the truth is, it's already true. Avoiding it because you're afraid of the answer doesn't make it less true. It just means you're operating on incomplete information, which guarantees worse outcomes. The third agreement also applies to assumptions about yourself. Many of us operate under assumptions about our own capabilities that we've never tested. I'm not creative. I'm bad with money. I couldn't do that. These are just assumptions. They might be wrong, but you'll never know if you never question them. And it applies to assumptions about the future. We assume things will work out a certain way, usually the worst way, and we suffer in advance for disasters that never materialize. The habit of catastrophic thinking is just assumption, making run amok, the practice. Catch yourself making assumptions. When you notice your mind spinning a story, stop and ask, do I actually know this is true? What do I need to ask or clarify? Then, if appropriate, actually ask. One more thing about assumptions. Making assumptions is closely tied to the need to be right. When we assume something and then act on that assumption, we're invested in being right about it. Because if we're wrong, we have to admit we created a whole drama out of nothing. The ego hates that. So we double down. We look for evidence that confirms our assumption and ignore evidence that contradicts it. Breaking this cycle requires humility. It requires being willing to say, I was wrong about that. I made an assumption and it wasn't fair. But that willingness to be wrong is precisely what creates the possibility for genuine connection. Key takeaway: find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. Reflection prompt. What's an assumption you're currently making about someone in your life? What would it take to find out the truth instead? Chapter 11. Agreement 4. Always do your best. Summary. Your best changes from moment to moment. It's different when you're healthy versus sick, rested versus exhausted. The agreement isn't to achieve perfection. It's to give whatever you have right now. When you do your best, you avoid self-judgment because you know you couldn't have done more. But your best requires honest self-assessment, not self-deception. The fourth agreement is the one that makes the first three possible. Always do your best. But here's what most people misunderstand. Doing your best is not about external standards or outcomes. It's about internal integrity. It's about knowing honestly that you gave what you had. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. Your best, when you've had 8 hours of sleep, eaten well and exercised, is going to be very different from your best when you're running on 4 hours of sleep, fighting a cold, and dealing with a crisis. The agreement isn't to always operate at peak capacity. That's impossible. The agreement is to give whatever capacity you have. This is profoundly liberating. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to compare yourself to anyone else or even to your own past performances. Your only obligation is to show up honestly and give what you have. Now here's where it gets tricky. Doing your best can become just another way to beat yourself up if you're not careful. The judge loves this agreement because the judge can always find evidence that you could have done better. You say you did your best, but you took that break. You got distracted. You didn't push as hard as you could have. This is why doing your best requires self-honesty, not self-punishment. There's a difference between honestly assessing, I could have tried harder there, and the judge's blanket condemnation, you're lazy and worthless. The first is useful information. The second is just abuse. Think of it this way. If a good friend came to you and described a situation where they struggled, would you berate them for not doing better? Or would you say, sounds like you were dealing with a lot, you did what you could? Extend yourself the same compassion. The fourth agreement is also the engine of transformation. The first three agreements require practice, and the practice requires doing your best. Some days you'll nail all four agreements. Some days you'll nail none. Some days you'll catch yourself gossiping, take a breath, and stop. That's doing your best. Some days you'll catch yourself and keep gossiping anyway. That was your best in that moment. The key is to keep practicing, without the added layer of self-judgment. There's a powerful insight here about motivation. Doing your best because you want approval is exhausting and ultimately impossible because you can never control whether others approve. Doing your best because you've made an agreement with yourself is sustainable. You're the only one who knows whether you truly gave your best, and you're the only one whose judgment matters. The practice. At the end of each day, ask yourself honestly, did I do my best today? With my word? With not taking things personally? With not making assumptions? If yes, great. If not, no judgment. Tomorrow you'll try again. The consistency of the effort matters more than any individual success or failure. One final nuance. Doing your best sometimes means resting. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means acknowledging that you're depleted and need recovery. The person who pushes themselves past their limits out of guilt isn't doing their best. They're acting out of old programming about never being enough. True self-care is part of doing your best. Key takeaway: under any circumstance, simply do your best. No more, no less. Keep in mind that your best is never going to be the same from one moment to the next. When you do your best, you learn to accept yourself without judgment. But you also learn to honestly assess when you're not truly giving your best and adjust accordingly. Reflection prompt. Think about a recent situation where you felt you didn't do your best. Was it really that you didn't try, or were you depleted in some way? What would doing your best have looked like, given the circumstances? Part 3, The Art of Dreaming. Chapter 12, The Second Attention, Choosing Your Dream. Summary. You used your attention for the first time when you were domesticated as a child, absorbing the beliefs of those around you. Now, as an adult, you can use your attention for the second time, consciously choosing what to believe, what to focus on, and what kind of dream you want to live. This is the shift from being dreamt by the dream to becoming the dreamer. We've covered a lot of ground. We explored how you were programmed, how your mind creates your reality, the 4 emotional skills, the art of selective caring, and the 4 agreements that can rewrite your mental code. Now it's time to put it all together. The Toltec call this the second attention, using your attention for the second time, consciously, to create the dream you want rather than living the dream you were given. The first time your attention was used, you were a child. Adults around you hooked your attention, through rewards, through punishments, through the sheer power of their presence, and taught you what to believe. You learned to dream the way they dreamed. You absorbed their fears, their values, their assumptions. None of this was your choice, it was just what happened. But now, as an adult, you have the capacity to choose. You can decide what beliefs serve you and what beliefs cause suffering. You can decide what's worth caring about and what's not. You can decide which agreements you'll keep and which you'll replace. This is the essential shift, from believing that your thoughts are you, to recognizing that your thoughts are just thoughts. Mental events that you can observe, question, and choose whether to believe. Here's how to practice the second attention in daily life. First, become aware of what's already running. Notice the automatic reactions, the assumptions, the judgments, the moments when you take things personally. Don't try to change anything yet, just notice. Awareness itself is transformative. Second, ask questions. When you notice a belief causing suffering, ask, is this true? Where did I learn this? Does this serve me? What would happen if I believed something different? Third, make new agreements. Consciously choose beliefs that align with the life you want to live. I am capable of learning. I am worthy of love. Mistakes are how I grow. Other people's opinions are about them, not me. Write these new agreements down. Review them daily. Practice them until they become as automatic as the old ones. Fourth, use your imagination. The mind doesn't distinguish sharply between vividly imagined experiences and actual ones. Athletes use visualization to improve performance. You can use it to reshape your dream. Spend time each day imagining yourself living by your new agreements. Imagine responding to criticism with calm. Imagine setting boundaries with love. Imagine catching yourself before you gossip. The more you rehearse in imagination, the more natural these responses become in reality. Fifth, expect resistance. The old programming won't disappear overnight. The judge and the victim won't go quietly. You'll fall back into old patterns. That's normal. That's expected. The practice isn't about being perfect. It's about returning to the new agreements more quickly each time you stray. Key takeaway: you are not a victim of your programming. You are the programmer. The power to choose what you believe and therefore what you experience is always available in the present moment. Reflection prompt. If you could design your ideal operating system, your personal book of law rewritten from scratch, what would it include? What beliefs would you choose to live by? Chapter 13. Action, Reaction. The Practical Alchemy of Change. Summary: every action produces a reaction. If you don't like the reactions in your life, you need to change the actions. This sounds obvious, but most people keep doing the same things and expecting different results. The 4 agreements provide a framework for identifying which actions need to change and what new actions to practice. Let's get even more practical. Everything in your emotional life operates on a simple principle. Action, reaction. You do something or think something, and a feeling follows. The feeling seems automatic, inevitable, but it's actually the result of a choice you made, usually unconsciously. Here's an example. 30 seconds ago, you thought about a mistake you made 10 years ago. That was the action. The reaction is that now you feel shame, guilt, regret. You think you're feeling bad about something that happened a decade ago, but you're not. You're feeling bad about something that happened 30 seconds ago. You chose to revisit that memory. This is good news, because it means the solution is in the present moment, not the past. You can't change what happened 10 years ago, but you can change what you do in the next 30 seconds. Let's walk through how the 4 agreements transform this dynamic. 30 seconds ago, when you revisited that memory, you were not impeccable with your word. You used your word against yourself. The antidote? In this moment, you can say to yourself, "Oh, I forgive myself. I did the best I could with what I knew then. I'm not that person anymore." That's impeccability. 30 seconds ago, you took it personally. Something from a decade ago. It's a ghost, no longer real, but you still took it personally. The antidote: you recognize that whatever happened involved people acting from their own dreams, their own programming. It wasn't ultimately about you, and even if it was about you then, it's not now. 30 seconds ago, you made assumptions. You assumed that everyone still remembers your mistake, that they're still judging you for it, that it still defines you. The truth? Most people are too busy thinking about their own mistakes to spend much time thinking about yours. And those who are still judging you are doing so from their own wounds. 30 seconds ago, you didn't do your best because the action you took made you feel miserable. Doing your best in this moment means choosing a different action. Choosing self-forgiveness instead of self-flagellation. Choosing to learn from the memory rather than to be tortured by it. This is the alchemy of the 4 agreements. They take the base metal of old, painful patterns and transform them into gold, not by magic, but by conscious, deliberate practice. The key is to use the process. Awareness first. Notice what you're doing. Then attention. Focus on the specific action, reaction pattern. Then new action. Apply the 4 agreements. Then repetition. Practice until the new pattern becomes automatic. It takes time. It takes repetition. But it works. And every time you successfully interrupt an old pattern, you reclaim some of the personal power that was trapped in it. You become a little freer, a little more yourself. Key takeaway: every choice has a consequence. When you change the choice, you change the consequence. The 4 agreements give you a framework for making different choices in real time. Reflection prompt: think of an emotional reaction you had recently that you wish you'd handled differently. Walk through it using the 4 agreements. What action did you take? What reaction followed? How could a different action, guided by the agreements, have produced a different reaction? Chapter 14. Dealing with Death. The ultimate perspective summary. The awareness of death isn't morbid. It's clarifying. When you remember that your time is finite, trivial concerns lose their grip. The angel of death in Toltec teaching is always beside us, ready to take everything away. This isn't a threat. It's an invitation to live fully, to attach intensely to what matters and detach gracefully from what doesn't. We need to talk about death, not to be gloomy. Quite the opposite. The awareness of death is one of the most powerful tools for living a joyful, meaningful life. The Toltecs speak of surrendering to the angel of death. The image is of a presence that is always with you, always ready to take everything away. Not as punishment, but simply as the nature of things. Everything passes. Everything transforms. Nothing lasts. When you truly accept this, not just intellectually but in your bones, something shifts. The things that seemed so important lose their weight. The grudges you've been carrying seem absurd. The fears that have been holding you back reveal themselves as illusions. What actually matters comes into sharp focus. There's a practice here that can transform your relationship with life. It's called attach, detach. Here's how it works. When something or someone is present in your life, you attach fully. You give your complete attention. You love without reservation. You experience the moment with all your senses. You're fully alive to what's happening right now. And when the moment passes, When the person leaves, when the experience ends, when the stage of life changes, you detach. You let go. You don't cling. You don't try to freeze time. You don't make yourself miserable wishing things were different. This doesn't mean you don't grieve loss. Grief is natural. Grief is appropriate. Grief is a form of attachment that honors what was. But grief eventually resolves into acceptance, unless we resist it. Unless we keep the past alive in our minds, playing old movies over and over, refusing to let them end. Most human suffering comes from either not fully attaching in the present, because we're distracted, afraid, or somewhere else mentally, or not detaching when the time comes, because we're clinging to what's already gone. Think about it. You're with someone you love, but you're scrolling through your phone. That's failure to attach. Or you're still angry about something your ex did years ago. That's failure to detach. Both create suffering. The angel of death teaches perspective. When you remember your mortality, the question becomes, given that my time is limited, how do I want to spend it? What's actually worth my attention? What am I carrying that I could put down? Most of what we carry, resentments, regrets, anxieties about the future, obsessions with how we're perceived, is dead weight. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve anyone. The only reason we carry it is habit. Surrendering to the angel of death means letting go of that weight. It means accepting that change is the nature of reality. It means being willing to be transformed. Key takeaway: life is what's happening right now. The past is a memory trace. The future is an imagination. Clinging to either takes you out of the only moment where life actually occurs. Reflection prompt: if you knew you had 1 year to live, what would you stop caring about? What would you start caring about instead? What's stopping you from making those shifts now? Part 4. The Emotionally Intelligent Manager of Your Own Life. Chapter 15. Managing Yourself First Summary. You can't effectively manage others until you can manage yourself. The 4 emotional skills apply as much to your internal world as to your external relationships. Leadership of any kind, in work, in family, in community, begins with emotional self-awareness and self-management. Let's zoom in now on the practical application of emotional intelligence in daily life. You might be thinking, I'm not a manager. This doesn't apply to me. But you are a manager of your own life. You manage your time, your energy, your relationships. You make decisions that affect your future. You navigate complex social situations. You deal with challenges, setbacks, and conflicts. And if you do have formal leadership responsibilities, whether at work, in your family, or in your community, the emotional skills become even more critical. Research consistently shows that emotional intelligence is a better predictor of leadership effectiveness than IQ, technical skills, or experience. So let's explore how the 4 emotional skills apply to managing your life. Identifying emotions in self-management. The foundation of all self-management is knowing what you're actually feeling. This sounds obvious, but think about it. How often do you react to something without really knowing why? How often do you find yourself in a bad mood and just accept it as reality, rather than investigating? Emotionally intelligent self-management starts with pausing when you feel a strong emotion and asking, what exactly am I feeling? What triggered this? Is this feeling proportionate to the situation? Let's say you're about to have a difficult conversation with someone. Maybe it's a performance review with an employee or a discussion with your partner about something that's been bothering you. Before you go in, check in. How am I feeling right now? Anxious? Irritated? Defensive? What am I assuming about how this conversation will go? How might my current emotions be coloring my perception? Just this pause can prevent enormous amounts of conflict. It creates space between the feeling and the reaction, and in that space is your power to choose. Using emotions in self-management. Once you know what you're feeling, you can use that information to guide your thinking. Remember, different moods facilitate different types of thinking. If you're feeling anxious about a presentation, that anxiety is actually focusing your attention on potential problems. Use that. Channel it into preparation. Review your material with the detail-oriented attention that anxiety facilitates. Don't try to force yourself into a positive mood. The anxiety is serving a purpose. If you need to generate creative ideas for a project but you're feeling flat, recognize that your current mood isn't ideal for creative thinking. Take steps to shift it. Listen to music that energizes you. Take a walk. Think about something that makes you happy. Then, once you're in a more positive state, tackle the creative work. This is the difference between being controlled by your emotions and using them as tools. Understanding emotions in self-management. The third skill involves understanding why you're feeling what you're feeling and predicting how your emotions will change. Let's say you're dreading a Monday morning meeting. Why? Is it the meeting itself, or is it the person you have to see there? Is it the content, or is it the way the meeting makes you feel about yourself? Understanding the true cause of your emotion allows you to address the actual problem, not just the symptom. And then there's prediction. If I go into this meeting in a defensive state, how will it go? Probably poorly. If I can shift to a more open state, what changes? Being able to run these emotional what-if scenarios in advance allows you to prepare effectively. Managing emotions in self-management. This is where it all comes together. Managing emotions doesn't mean suppressing them. It means integrating them with your thinking to make wise decisions. The emotionally intelligent manager of self knows when to lean into an emotion and when to step back. They know that sometimes anger needs to be expressed, but expressed skillfully, not explosively. They know that sometimes sadness needs to be felt, but felt without wallowing. They know that joy should be celebrated, but celebrated without losing touch with reality. One of the most powerful tools in this domain is what we might call the emotion recalibration. When you notice you're in a mood that doesn't serve the situation, you're agitated before a meditation session or lethargic before a workout, you can deliberately shift your state. How? Through physical movement. Exercise changes mood reliably. Through music, through environment change, through social connection, through breathing exercises, through changing what you're paying attention to. The specific technique matters less than the recognition that you're not stuck with whatever mood you happen to be in. Key takeaway: managing yourself emotionally isn't about being perfectly controlled at all times. It's about developing the awareness to recognize what you're feeling and the skill to work with those feelings effectively. Reflection prompt. Think of a regular situation in your life that reliably triggers difficult emotions. Walk through the 4 skills. What do you feel? How does that feeling influence your thinking? Why do you feel that way? What could you do differently to manage the situation more effectively? Chapter 16. Building Better Relationships. Summary. The same emotional skills that help you manage yourself can be applied to managing relationships. The key is to expand the emotional blueprint to include not just your own emotions, but the emotions of the people you're interacting with. When you can accurately read others, understand what's driving their behavior, and respond wisely, your relationships transform. Now let's extend the emotional skills outward to your interactions with others. The emotional blueprint we've been developing can be expanded to include other people. Instead of just asking, "How do I feel?" you also ask, "How do they feel?" Instead of just, "How are my feelings influencing my thinking?" you also ask, "How are their feelings influencing their thinking?" And so on. Let's walk through this expanded blueprint. Step 1. Identify emotions in others. This means paying attention to the same channels we discussed earlier. Facial expressions, voice tone, body language, but directed outward. What is this person feeling right now? What's the evidence? But here's a crucial caution. You never actually know what someone else is feeling. You can only make educated guesses based on the signals they're sending. And those signals are filtered through your own biases, your own assumptions, your own book of law. So stay humble. Hold your read as a hypothesis, not a certainty. Step 2. Use emotions to understand their perspective. If your read is that the other person is feeling defensive, what does that tell you? Defensiveness usually means the person feels threatened. What might be threatening them? What might they be protecting? This is where empathy becomes powerful. Not just, "I see that you're upset," but I can imagine what it might feel like to be in your position right now. When you can generate a similar emotional state within yourself, even a mild version of it, you gain insight into what the other person might need. Step 3. Understand the emotional dynamics. Why might this person be feeling this way? What's the history? What happened just before this interaction? What are the underlying causes? And then the what if analysis. If I respond this way, how might their emotions shift? If I respond that way, what might happen? Being able to anticipate emotional reactions allows you to choose responses that lead toward resolution rather than escalation. Step 4. Manage the interaction. This is where you integrate all the information and choose your response. The goal isn't to manipulate, it's to communicate effectively, to address real issues, to maintain or improve the relationship while also honoring your own needs. Sometimes this means being direct. I'm sensing some tension. Can we talk about what's going on? Sometimes it means being strategic. I can see you're not in a place to have this conversation right now. Let's come back to it tomorrow. Sometimes it means disengaging. I don't think this conversation is productive right now. I'm going to step away. Let's apply this to a concrete situation, managing change. When you're trying to implement change, whether at work, in your family, or in a community, emotions will run high. People fear change. They resist it. They get angry, anxious, defensive. An emotionally intelligent approach to change management starts with identifying what people are feeling, not assuming, actually paying attention. Then using that emotional information to understand their perspective. Why are they resisting? What are they afraid of losing? What do they need to feel safe? Then understanding the dynamics. If we push harder, what happens? If we slow down, what happens? If we address the fears directly, what happens? Then managing the process, communicating clearly, acknowledging feelings, creating space for concerns to be expressed, and gradually building buy-in. Not by manipulating, but by genuinely engaging with the emotional reality of the situation. The same blueprint applies to conflict resolution, to giving feedback, to motivating people, to building teams. In every case, the key is the same. Emotions contain information. Ignore that information at your peril. Use it wisely, and you can navigate almost any interpersonal challenge. Key takeaway. Effective relationships aren't built on emotional suppression or emotional explosion. They're built on emotional intelligence, the ability to read, understand, and work with emotions in yourself and others. Reflection prompt. Think of an important relationship in your life that could be improved. Using the expanded emotional blueprint, what might be going on emotionally for the other person that you haven't been acknowledging? Chapter 17. The Emotionally Intelligent Organization and Family and Community. Summary. The principles of emotional intelligence scale up. Teams, organizations, and communities have emotional climates that can be read, understood, and influenced. Creating environments where people can do their best work and live their best lives requires attending to the emotional dimension of collective experience. Now let's zoom out even further. Groups have emotions, teams have moods, organizations have emotional climates, families have emotional atmospheres, and these collective emotional states influence everything: productivity, creativity, conflict, satisfaction, retention. Research on emotional contagion shows that emotions spread through groups like viruses. One person's bad mood can infect an entire team. One person's enthusiasm can elevate everyone. And the people with the most power in a group, formal or informal leaders, have the greatest emotional influence, whether they intend to or not. What does this mean practically? It means that if you're in any kind of leadership position, your emotional state isn't just your business. It's everyone's business. When you walk into a room anxious or angry, everyone feels it. When you're genuinely calm and optimistic, that spreads too. This isn't about faking positivity. People can detect inauthenticity instantly. And fake positivity creates more distrust than honest negativity. It's about being aware of your impact and taking responsibility for it. It also means that creating a healthy emotional climate is one of the most important things a leader can do. This includes normalizing the expression of emotions within appropriate bounds. People shouldn't have to pretend they're robots, addressing emotional issues directly rather than letting them fester. Conflict avoidance doesn't make conflict disappear, it just drives it underground where it does more damage. Celebrating successes genuinely. Joy is a legitimate workplace emotion, and it's vastly underutilized in most organizations. Creating psychological safety. People need to feel that they can speak up, make mistakes, and express concerns without being punished. But here's what really matters. All of this starts with you. You can't create an emotionally intelligent organization, family, or community if you're not practicing emotional intelligence yourself. The culture follows the leader. If you gossip, your team will gossip. If you take things personally, your team will become defensive. If you make assumptions, your team will operate on incomplete information. Conversely, when you practice the 4 agreements, when you're impeccable with your word, when you don't take things personally, when you don't make assumptions, when you always do your best, you model a different way of being. And modeling is the most powerful form of leadership. Key takeaway: the emotional climate of any group reflects the emotional maturity of its leadership. Change yourself, and you change the culture around you. Reflection prompt: what's the emotional climate of the group you spend the most time with? What role do you play in that climate? What might change if you practiced greater emotional intelligence? Chapter 18. The Integrated Life Summary. All the threads come together here. The 4 emotional skills, the 4 agreements, the art of selective caring, the awareness of death, they're not separate practices. They're different facets of a single way of being. The integrated life isn't about perfect balance or constant happiness. It's about living with awareness, choosing consciously, and responding to what life brings with wisdom rather than reactivity. We've covered an enormous amount of territory. Now let's weave it all together. The integrated life, the life where all these principles come together, isn't about achieving some perfect state. It's about practicing a different way of being, day by day, moment by moment. Here's what that looks like in practice. You wake up in the morning. Before your mind fills with the day's demands, you take a moment to check in. How are you feeling? What's your mood? What's your energy level? This is emotional identification, the first skill. You think about what's ahead. A difficult meeting, perhaps. You notice some anxiety. Instead of trying to push it away, you recognize that anxiety is focusing your attention. You can use this. You review your preparation. You anticipate potential problems. This is using emotions, the second skill. You think about the people you'll interact with. Your boss has been stressed lately. Your colleague is dealing with a personal issue. You understand at least roughly what they might be feeling and why. You run some emotional what-if scenarios. If I approach the meeting this way, how might they respond? This is understanding emotions, the third skill. You make a conscious choice about how you'll show up. You decide to be impeccable with your word, to speak honestly but kindly, to say what you mean. You decide not to take anything personally. Whatever happens in the meeting reflects others' realities as much as yours. You decide not to make assumptions. If something is unclear, you'll ask. You decide to do your best, not to be perfect, but to give what you have. This is managing emotions, the fourth skill and the 4 agreements in action. Throughout the day you practice. You catch yourself when you start to gossip, and you stop. You notice when you're taking something personally, and you step back. You observe when you're making assumptions, and you ask instead. You give your best, recognizing that your best varies from hour to hour. At the end of the day, you reflect. Where did you live your agreements well? Where did you fall short? No judgment, just awareness. Tomorrow you'll practice again. This is the path, not a destination, but a practice. Not perfection, but progress. And through it all you hold the awareness that this life is temporary. The angel of death is always beside you, not as a threat, but as a reminder. A reminder to attach fully to what matters. The people you love, the work that has meaning, the moments of beauty and connection. And to detach gracefully from what doesn't matter, the slights, the worries, the endless trivial concerns that consume so much of most people's attention. This is the subtle art made practical. Not caring less about everything, but caring deeply about the right things. Not suppressing emotions, but working with them skillfully. Not escaping into some spiritual fantasy, but engaging fully with the messy, beautiful, challenging reality of being human. Key takeaway: the integrated life isn't a state you achieve. It's a practice you engage in, moment by moment, choice by choice, day by day. Reflection prompt: looking back over everything we've explored, what's the single most important shift you want to make in how you approach your life? What's one practice you can commit to starting today? Afterward, the new dream. There's a vision in the Toltec tradition of a different kind of world. A world where humans don't poison each other with words, where they don't take everything personally, where they communicate clearly instead of making assumptions, where they do their best and accept themselves and each other. It sounds utopian. Maybe it is. But utopias serve a purpose. They show us what direction to walk. You don't need to change the whole world. You just need to change your own dream. And when you change your dream, the world you experience changes with it. The outside dream, the collective dream of humanity, is nothing but the sum of billions of individual dreams. When individuals wake up and start dreaming differently, the collective dream shifts. This has happened before. It's happening now. It will continue to happen. Every person who breaks free from the old programming, who stops feeding the parasite, who reclaims their creative power, who learns to work with emotions rather than being enslaved by them, is contributing to a larger transformation. You are one of those people. The very fact that you've engaged with these ideas means something in you is ready. Ready to wake up, ready to practice, ready to dream a new dream. The path is simple, though not easy. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, always do your best. Identify your emotions, use them, understand them, manage them. Care deeply about what matters and let the rest go. Remember that you're dreaming and that you can change the dream. Remember that this life is temporary and precious. Practice, fail, practice again. That's the whole thing. Your life is your masterpiece. What kind of dream do you want to create? Final reflection. Take a moment now to set an intention. What's one thing from this journey that you're going to carry forward? What's one practice you're committed to? Write it down. Put it somewhere you'll see it. Let it be your anchor as you continue to practice, to grow, to dream.